Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the next Novation live stream. Good evening from the UK, and hello around the world. I wonder where you're joining us from this evening. But my name's Chris Calcutt, sometimes known as CALC, and here we are down in Brighton on the Novation YouTube channel. And this evening we're going to revisit the SL MkIII. The SL MkIII is the flagship controller keyboard from Novation, but is also a very fascinating and powerful sequencer as well. So if you're interested in making music with your computer, this thing will allow you to take control over all your DAWs, your music software. But if you're a little bit more like myself and like to make music simply on hardware, then also the SL MkIII is a very, very strong sequencer and keyboard, and a whole variety of various different things. So the plan for this evening is, well, it's quite exciting for me because I'm going to talk a little bit about this particular room. So looking at the room here, if we move, here is the SL MkIII. And the SL MkIII obviously is here in the centre of the desk. This is really the centrepiece of this room, of this studio. And what I want to do is really just talk a bit about the connections and how I use it in this particular space to access all of the various things around me. So here we can see the camera is pointing to the top down for the SL MkIII. The SL MkIII is controlling each of these devices sitting in front of me as well. So we've got a Yamaha Reface CP, a wonderful little box called a Beat Squeezer, really a great little product. This is essentially a sampler, and I use this a lot for piano sounds and that sort of thing, but basically you can load any type of samples into there, and it just gives you a really great kind of sounding access to the sort of instruments, you know, that are away from the usual kind of synthesizer fare that I like to play with as well. We've also got the Electron Octatrack. This is the Mark I. I've had this for quite a while now, and this is something I use a lot, and I'm very happy and pleased with it. I use this essentially for kind of, well, really mostly for loops. I mean, it's kind of light use of what the Octatrack, you know, compared to what the Octatrack is actually capable of. But this really gives me a lot of foundation for getting a lot of rhythms and kind of beats and that sort of thing in the sort of music that I'm making. Alongside that, I've got some effects as well here. The Strymon Deco, which is tape saturation, and a wonderful flange effect, tape flange effect. I really enjoy that. But then next to that, from a French company, Otto Boom and the Otto BAM. The BAM is a reverb, the Boom is a compressor and warming unit. Again, very nice things. And finally at the end there, which you might not be able to see actually on this particular shot, but I have an Otto Bit Junior as well. That's the Meris Otto Bit Junior, which is a bit crusher, but it's got a really interesting stutter effect. Now, obviously, you know, we're here to talk about the Novation SL MkIII, but it's just, you know, really nice to be able to say that this device here gives me a central point, a central connection to all of these devices, and allows me to take total control over it. Now I'm going to switch over to the next camera, and over here now you'll see this is the other wall. This is to my right hand side, just over here, and of course I've got a lot of different things here as well. So essentially, you know, just a quick rundown. The Novation Summits, an incredible sounding machine and really powerful. I would say this is probably the most powerful synth that I've had the fortune to play with. Really nice. Again, everything is being controlled from the SL here and sending MIDI over here, allowing me to connect directly to that. Okay, other bits on there as well. I've got a little modular case there, and that is also completely controllable via the SL MkIII. At the moment, I'm just sending clock over to the modular here, and I'm using sort of internal stuff there to essentially kind of drive what's going on with the modular. But you'll see above it this kind of wonderful orange and black device, and that's an old ARP 2600. I'm very fortunate enough to to have a 2600. Actually, I've had this one for a long time. It's been with me for a long time. And again, of course, this is an old system, so this is not based around MIDI. This is using CV and gate to be controlled. And once again, the SL MkIII here is allowing me to do that. It's the same also with the SH101 that you'll see over in the corner there as well. Yeah, so let's, I'm going to fade the music down a little bit here, and then we'll just talk about the way that things are all set up. So I mentioned, obviously, here we've got the SL MkIII, and I think one interesting thing about the SL MkIII is the amount of connectivity that we have on here. You know, in the introduction there, I've been explaining about how this connects to pretty much everything in the room and allows me to have one central point to control all of the various different instruments in this room. You know, I kind of sometimes think of it as a bit like a conductor of an orchestra. You know, we've got all the various different players around, but this thing here is the thing that's really kind of allowing me to control and sequence and work with it. I don't use a DAW for making music, as I say. I do everything pretty much directly from this keyboard itself, and I kind of really enjoy that workflow. I mean, obviously DAWs are pretty spectacular devices. Well, you know, applications. They are so powerful. But for me, I really enjoy the immediacy of just sort of sequencing something directly, and also, you know, I really enjoy the fact that I can kind of perform on those instruments, and I kind of become a whole band here when I'm working on that. But of course, we've got to connect everything together, so it's, I think, a little worthwhile to just kind of cover how we can, you know, how we're talking to everything. Now, each of the devices in front of me here speak using MIDI, musical instrument digital interface, which is a traditional kind of way for these kind of instruments to talk. Some of the devices are synced. That means when I hit play, they're going to actually play in time, and all the clock is being generated from here as well. Now, the SL MkIII actually has two MIDI outputs on the back of the unit, and that's really nice. And one of the reasons for that is one of the reasons that's so nice is really because essentially MIDI works normally over 16 MIDI channels. You have channels 1 through to 16, but actually by having two separate MIDI outputs on the back here, that's effectively giving me 32 addressable channels. So I could technically connect up to 32 separate instruments and have, you know, access to those instruments at any one time. Well, not 32 at one time, but I can access those instruments from the SL as and when I choose to. So this is a really kind of nice solution. One of the things that is really good in this respect is with the Electron Octatrack here. The Electron Octatrack is based around 8 separate tracks, and each of those separate tracks is connected via a MIDI channel. So in actual fact, the Octatrack itself takes up 8 of what would normally be 16 channels. But actually, because I have the additional second output there, that means that it's not so much of a major issue. So the signal flow from this side is, so this is MIDI sort of output 1, if you like, and this is going into the Octatrack. That's the very first thing that it's doing. And it's going to the MIDI input on the Octatrack. So the output goes to the input. Then we have a MIDI through connection on the back of the Octatrack as well. Now that is going to an interesting little box. It's a MIDI splitter, MIDI through box. Now this is an example of one here. And this is essentially a way of being able to take one MIDI signal and split that out to various different devices without having to use what's called MIDI through. MIDI through is basically a repeater of the MIDI input. So whatever comes in on MIDI in will be repeated on the MIDI through. But a lot of devices these days don't actually give you the MIDI through connection. And so what happens there is basically you need to be able to take that MIDI signal and then farm that out to other places. So a MIDI splitter is really quite a useful device in that instance. This is an example of one I'm using. Actually, I have 2 of them set up in this room. I have one behind the Octatrack here. And from that MIDI splitter, which, as I mentioned, is fed from the Octatrack's MIDI through. So SL goes to the Octatrack, the MIDI through then goes through to a MIDI splitter, and from that point another MIDI connection is made to the MIDI input of the Yamaha Reface CP, one to the beat squeezer here as well, and then what else do we have? Oh yeah, I've got one I think going to the Autobit Junior as well, the effects pedal over here. That has MIDI control too, and that gives me some really nice opportunity to be able to actually manipulate and control that via MIDI as well. I mentioned I've got another splitter, and that's over on this side here, and that's coming from this second output 2. That goes to a splitter over there, and once again that's then kind of sending the MIDI signal out to various places. So I have one then going into the Summit here, I have one going to the Circuit Monostation, one to the TR8S, and then let's see, where else does it go? Oh yes, I've got one going to a box here. This is the CV-OCD. Now this box is very good because it takes a MIDI signal and then turns that into CV and gate signals. Now I have got CV and gate on the SL already, but the CV-OCD just expands on what I can do in that respect. And actually I have that connected to one of the modules here in the modular rack as well. So that's kind of a bit of the MIDI routing, you know, that's kind of how that's all being sent out directly from the SL MkIII. And then I've also got these connections on the back here. Let's move back to this camera. Here we go. So here we've got, basically I've got 7 different connectors in here which are providing me with control voltage, CV, gate, but also interestingly a modulation control as well. Now, if you're kind of familiar with synthesizers, you probably know about CV and gate. If you're not, basically CV, control voltage, is using voltage to send to synthesizers. And that voltage, the variation in that voltage, allows you to change, for example, the pitch of something. The gate value is essentially the length of the note, or the trigger, if you like, for the note in certain circumstances. But in addition to this, we have this modulation control. Now, here on this particular track on my SL MkIII, now we'll talk about the SL MkIII and how that all kind of works, but let's just think about the connectivity at the moment. Here I've got this particular track set to send out a signal to my ARP 2600. And so if I start to play the keys, let's just turn off the auto bit. We don't need that extra signal. So here is the ARP 2600, and here I've got this connected directly to the filter. So from this central point here, I'm able to just send the value from this particular pot out of this modulation control here, and then that allows me to control the fine filter that we have in the ARP 2600. I've also got this one set to control pulse width on oscillator 2. Now I've got a couple of oscillators firing here, so it's a bit more difficult to kind of specifically hear that, but I'm using this second modulation output to send to another part on the ARP 2600. So this gives me 2 controls on the SL MkIII that allow me to shape the sound on that synthesizer. And so that's a really neat feature to have. Now that, in combination with the sequencer that we have on the SL MkIII, offers something really quite neat. So I'm going to go to my sessions page here on the SL, and I'm just going to go up to this page, and here I have a template stored. Now, actually, this is perhaps a nice time to sort of just talk a little bit about the way that the SL MkIII is structured. Actually, I spotted a question earlier that somebody was asking, saying, you know, please explain the difference between the templates, the sessions, the patterns, and how all that works within the SL MkIII. So let's go from the very top. The sessions that we store in the SL MkIII are essentially the whole session, and that is, you can think of that basically like a track, if you like. The sessions page is where I save and load my content. It's a bit like the file menu in any software, you know, where you load and save from. And the sessions page is pretty much that sort of setup. And so here in the sessions page, you see I've got all these various different coloured pads on the grid pads here, and these are all individual little sessions. Now I've set up this first one, number 1 here, as a template, and we use the word template in a slightly different way when we come to the actual instruments. When I say template on this instance, I'm meaning this is my starting point. This has got everything loaded in that I want to, you know, most of the time instantly access. Now I can store as many sessions as I like on here, and I can save as many setups in that respect as well. But in my case here, on this particular template, I have the beat squeezer on this first track. I've got the reface CP on the next track. I've got the summit here, so we've got a nice summit sound there. The next track is my octa track. Now I don't play the keys with the octa track, of course, because this is all giving me different beats, but what I do have is a really nice way to be able to control the performance aspect of the octa track. So let's just bring all these faders down here. If I hit play, now if I just bring this first fader up, here we've got this little beat running on track 1 on the octa track. If I bring up the second fader, so I can start to balance these. Now, one of the really nice things about this particular instance is that the octa track itself doesn't have a dedicated kind of mixer page. If I want to change the volumes on the octa track, I have to go to each individual track, really, and then individually change those volumes. So to have access to all 8 of them directly in front of me is really quite a nice and easy way to be able to use it. So let's move on. Let's go to this next track. This next track is going directly to the SH101. So I'll just turn that up here. So we've got the SH101 being fired off this track. This next track is going to that CVOCD, the thing I was just showing you over here, which is basically this MIDI to CV converter. So what happens now is, if I go to this page, so basically now I can send different signals and maybe sequence them as well. And now if we look over at the page over here, I don't know if you can see, we've actually now got the lights being fired, and that's basically because the MIDI signal is going over to the CVOCD and then is getting converted into 8 different trigger outputs that is being sent to that sampler over there. Now the next one, I have a TR-08, and that's tucked away over in the corner over here. And again, this gives me some really nice ways to be able to control that that device. So let's go back here. So basically, now I've got, this is the kick drum note here. And again, I can just sort of press and hold the note and then tap in where I want that to be in the sequencer. Maybe we'll add some clap there. So very quick and easy to add that. Let's add some hi-hat as well. And once again, I've got some faders here, which I have mapped within this mapping here to give me control over the aspects of the TR-08. So here's the kick drum. So if I want the kick drum out, I can just drop that. If I want it back in, this is the clap, hi-hats. Let's bring in a bit of open hi-hat there. And again, I can drop all of that out if I want. Bring it back in. So again, having this additional control over that drum machine in the corner there just means everything's directly in front of me, and I'm really given this nice opportunity to just basically not have to worry about the device over there, but can still record and sequence and play with it. Now at the moment I've just been tapping some notes in. I've been holding a key and saying, okay, let's put that key there. So, but maybe I want to record it, so I can just hit the record button quite simply and then just play some notes in. Now at this point, I've recorded in that little snare part there. And by doing that, it's gone directly onto the beat for me. And that's because we have the ability to have a quantized recording in here. But if I press Shift and the record button, I can actually turn that off. So let's see, where is that snare? Let's find that. It's here. Let's get rid of that. And there as well. So now I've got the record quantize turned off. Let's record in again, and I'll play a little sloppier now, and we'll just hear how that is recorded into the sequencer. So you can see now that I've kind of recorded that in, and that kind of extra bit of timing, a bit of wonkiness is added to that sound as well. So that's where we're up to at the minute on this initial kind of session that I use, the starting point. And then finally, I've got the last track here with a mapping. Let's just turn that snare down a touch there. Yep, I've got this mapping here to another really nice piece of gear that we have over on the side here. And again, I'm sort of probably just covering that up. Let's just go back here. So you can see it, this thing, which is the Chase Bliss Blooper. This is a looper pedal, guitar pedal, I suppose, essentially, but a really, really nice looping system. And once again, this has MIDI on it. So it's a guitar pedal, but it has MIDI. And so I'm able to actually control the looper and control and automate these things directly from the SL MkIII. So, right, let's go back. Now, I had the SH101 here, but in fact, I'm going to now change this to be the ARP2600. So, I have 8 tracks, essentially, and 8 tracks go together to make one session. We've spoken about the sessions, but let's go back to the steps page here, and now I've got my 8 tracks. Now, on each of these 8 tracks, I have what is kind of the official terminology is a template. And a template is a mapping, a collection of controls that you can combine into one kind of template, one place. And that will allow me to essentially decide what aspects of the various things I want to control. So if I go to my templates page, Shift and Sessions, this takes me to the templates page. I have 64 different templates on here. It's a huge amount. And you can see here in the list, oh, let me just move back to the right camera. There we go. So Shift and Sessions takes you to the template page. And now I've got my templates here. And basically, I can just scroll down here and find the thing that I want to control. So I said I wanted the ARP2600. So there it is in my list. There it is. And now on this page, I can decide where the routing happens. I have the ability to send the MIDI out of the USB output on the connection here. I have the ability to send it out of the DIN connections on the back here. So DIN 1, DIN 2, or indeed, if I want, I can send the MIDI out of both of these at the same time. I've also got my CV and gate here as well, and I can send this out of CV1, one set of the controls, one set of the connectors here. I've got CV2, the other set, or again, I can send it out of both. And the final control here is the MIDI channel. Now this is not important for me at this stage because I'm only using CV. I've taken off the MIDI output, so it's not important here. But the CV and gate option here is what's going to send out to the ARP2600. Now I've set it to both, and the reason is I'm going to use the modulation CV control for 2 aspects of the ARP2600, the pulse width and also the filter. And by sending it out of both, it means I can access both of those modulation outputs. So let's turn on the quantize. Let's just find some notes and let's see what we can play. That'll do. So I hit record. Okay, so interestingly, I played a 2-bar phrase, but I completely forgot here I'm set to just record into one pattern. So this is a good opportunity to just talk a little bit about the patterns as well, and we'll come back to the automation. Now, we spoke about the sessions, we've spoken about the tracks that we have here, we've spoken about the templates as well, but how do we record and what do we record into? Well, each session is made up of 8 tracks, which we can load up with up to 8 templates. We have access points or places where we can go in and load in a template. But also, if I go to my patterns page, I have 8 patterns for each of those tracks. And a pattern is basically what we record into. Think of it as like a little container that we record into. Now, one pattern is made up of 16 steps. But if I go to my patterns page here, I can actually join patterns together, chain them together. And now, if I go back, I've chained 2 patterns together. So the first pattern will play. And now the second pattern, there is nothing in there because I didn't record into that. But I've extended the length of that particular musical phrase. So, using a combination of patterns means that we can chain up to 8 of these things together. Now that gives us it gives us a lot more than 64 steps. It gives us, I think, 128. Oh God, it's math time, and that's probably not a good idea. But basically, we have 16 steps and we have 8 of those. So basically, I can chain 8 together, and I have 8 bars worth of music, which is pretty good. It's it's decent enough to get a kind of, if you do quite a lot of sort of repetitive music, like obviously dance music, that sort of thing. There's quite a lot of scope there. But we can actually extend that out to be some really, really nice lengthy sequences. So let's just go back and clear these patterns. So I'm going to press the clear button and just clear all of those. Go back to this first pattern, and I'll show you how we can make one pattern actually 4 times as long. So at the minute, we're just going to access one pattern, which is going to play the ARP 2600. If I go to the options page here, I have a pattern menu. Pattern menu. If I click on the pattern menu, I have a thing called sync rate. Now this is set to 1/16th, 16ths, meaning that each of these 16 steps is a 16th in length, or a semiquaver in musical terms. But I can actually change that sync rate, and that will allow me to say, okay, each one of these steps is now a quarter note in length instead. So let's hit play. And you can see now that this is taking a lot longer to go through its whole pattern. Okay, so we've changed the resolution of this pattern so we can record into it. If I hit record and then start to play, we'll get some stuff in there. Now, what you'll notice is each of these notes now has lost kind of part of its resolution because we've turned each of these 16 steps into quarter notes. But we have a really neat way of being able to kind of mitigate that. So I'll just clear those notes out. Remember, I mentioned before we've got quantize off as well as quantize on record. Let's take quantize off, and now I can record in between these steps, which means that it's going to be which means I'm going to be able to basically record in between those and get a bit more of that rhythmic kind of feel in. So let's just make sure it's off, record quantize off, and then when I'm ready, we'll get to the end of the pattern, 2, 3, 4. So you can hear now I've actually got that rhythm recorded in there, and I've taken one pattern and made that now into 4 bars in length. So this is just one pattern, it's 4 bars, we have 8 of those. That's going to extend the amount of sort of space to record into, if I chain all 8 of those together, into 32 different bars. And that's a lot of power. Now, I'm just going to check over into the comment section here and just have a look to see if we've got any particular questions. So let's just, oh wow, it's busy over there, and I've had my head down and I've been doing a bit of demoing. So let's have a quick look here. Will it be possible to have 2 layers of 8 instruments in the future on the SL MkIII? That's from Elliot Keane. So let's see. Okay, so I guess the question there is about the way that you would work with Ableton, so that you would have, a kind of a track available for Ableton. Well, I mean, the reality is, it's an 8-track sequencer, and it's, that's a considerable amount of power. There's a lot of kind of processing stuff going on inside here, and that's, really kind of, I would say, where where we would kind of hit a limit, because we've got a lot of stuff going on in here. If you imagine each of these steps here, it's a polyphonic sequencer, so each of these 8 tracks, each of the 16 steps can hold 8 notes. Alongside that, it can hold 8 lanes of automation as well. And as we've just discovered, we could, this can be sort of 32 bars long, and that's in one session. And there are 64 sessions in here as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on in here. And I think in reality, you've got 8 tracks here. But if you want to use one of those tracks as kind of an Ableton controller, if you like, so I think Elliot's question is specifically about going into controlling Ableton. The way that I guess you would think of that is that Ableton itself is another one of those instruments. You have 7 other pieces of hardware here, and then if you go into Ableton, you will need to use one of the tracks here to be able to access or play directly into Ableton. But, once you're in Ableton, of course, you've got pretty much unlimited access to as many tracks as you want. So, I think if you consider that, giving over that one of those tracks is going to be, a controller that is dedicated to controlling your software, and then you have 7 other tracks that are all kind of doing the heavy lifting and the sequencing internally, I think, that's kind of, that's pretty much how you would go ahead to do that. So I think it's it's kind of it's one of those kind of payoffs, really. I mean, if you want to inhabit both worlds, so the DAW world and the hardware world, then really, this thing has got 8 tracks in there. So one of those is going to have to be given over, so that you have the convenience then of being able to record directly into Ableton and use that. Let's just have another quick look, see if we've got any more. There's a question there. Anyone know the mixer he's using? Well, yeah, I do. This is the Allen and Heath said R16. I've got this one. Well, actually, when they were first released, I bought one, and I was really taken with it because it's an analog mixer, but equally it's a Firewire audio interface. And actually, that's quite interesting as well. It's a Firewire audio interface, but it will deliver up to 28, I think it is, channels into your computer. So for me, this basically is almost like an inline tape based kind of system. I have 16 dedicated tracks there that all sent into my computer, and I can record stems directly from each of the channels on there if I want to. But in addition, it's got an ADAT connection, and I have down under I have down under here in a little rack the Focusrite Octapre Dynamic, and that is then connected to the mixer, giving me another 8 channels of analog, which is converted to digital down in the Octapre. And then that comes into the mixer here digitally, and then is passed on to the computer. So actually I've got 16 plus another 8, it's 24. It's 26 channels in total, because there's 24 kind of analog ins, if you like, into the computer, and then a stereo kind of loop back, if you like, so a stereo from the master output. Now, this is actually the second one that I've got hold of. The first one died on me, unfortunately. So I was racking my brains and thinking of another solution that would really fit the bill for what I want to do. And I just couldn't find anything else. So I bought another one of these instead. And it's quite interesting because most of the time these days, I only use 2 tracks. Basically, I use this as a little analog mixer and just record the master output directly into my DAW, maybe add a little bit of kind of compression, a bit of EQing at the end of that, just a bit of mastering, I suppose, if it's required. Often I don't even concern myself with that sort of thing as well. I just kind of play. If the moment was great and I've captured it, brilliant. If it wasn't, it's not a particularly big deal to me. I had a lot of fun doing it. So that's kind of pretty much my ethos, if you like, in terms of when I'm making music myself here. It's all really about sort of enjoying that moment and having that performance aspect there. So yeah, that's the Allen and Heath R16, a very good mixer. I don't think they're made anymore, unfortunately. Let's see, one more question. Let's see if we've got one. Let's see. Elliot again, he has got one more question. Well, okay then, no problem. Well, that's why we're here, I guess. So, is there a limitation within the hardware that would stop expansion for this, or is it something that could be implemented with a future firmware update? Wow. Okay. Well, that's a loaded question, and one that I can't particularly answer here in this kind of forum. However, you know, at Novation, we have, I suppose, garnered a reputation for firmware updates, adding features and that sort of thing to products. And this was really, I suppose, kind of something we did a lot with the Novation circuit product. We were listening to the users that we had, and the features that they wanted, and as and when it was possible to add them, and the user interface, that's very important. The user interface could be designed well enough to give customers a good experience with it, then we did what we could. With the SL MkIII, of course, you know, we're always looking at ways that the products and that sort of thing can be improved. As I say, I can't really explain any more than that at this point here. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that we can always kind of take a look at and see where we can take things. So, you know, maybe just keep an eye out and watch this space. You never know. Okay, I'm going to move back now onto the SL, and I recorded the ARP. And the reason I was recording the ARP before is because, well, firstly, we've got the extended pattern length stuff going on now. But I also mentioned I've got these templates, these mappings that I've made, and this is really neat because I can actually start to record automation from my templates. So here I've got my CV, second CV output from CV output 2. That's connected to the filter on the ARP 2600. So now essentially I can record in the automation. Now normally I wouldn't do this with a microphone in the way. Now you can see we've captured that in there, and this little screen is giving me the feedback there to say that there's automation on here. And now I've recorded in automation and I'm automating the ARP 2600 over here, which is a really nice thing to be able to do. Again, I can do this on pretty much anything. So let's go to the Octatrack and I'll just bring in the first kit. Okay, now let's go to the second one. And let's say I really like that first beat, but I don't want the whole beat in there. So once again, I can automate the fader. And I can do this in a nice way by just momentary hold. So basically, as I hold the record button down, it will make the recording. When I release, we're out of record, and then it won't capture any more data. So let's try that. Now, and you can actually see the automation represented here on this LED above that particular fader. Let's try it again with another track. So we can really start to bring that sort of thing in. Okay, now then, let's try another thing, and I'm going to go to the reface. I always enjoy going to the Yamaha reface. It's become a real sort of standard for me now. And I'm going to go to my patterns page and I'm going to say let's go and record a 4-bar pattern in. Now notice I'm holding the shift changing the patterns. You don't have to do that. I can just press a patterns whenever I want. And if you watch, as I press this one pattern here, it will flash, it's queuing up so that it will change, it will move into that pattern on the bar line. But if I press shift, it'll jump immediately. And also, if I have several patterns at one time, it's going to keep the position in the sequence. So if I press over here, you see it's flashing the last one before it goes back. So it knows that in the 4-bar sequence, that is the right sort of place. Let's go back here, see 4th bar, back to there. So basically it means you can instantly jump in between various things and you know, get some quite interesting things going. So let's hit record anyway, and I'm going to take off the record quantize, and let's just see what happens now. Okay, so we've got a nice little thing going on there, and once again I can do some automation. Let's automate the reverb perhaps. I've also got these buttons here as well, and these allow me to mute various tracks. So let's mute out the 808, and let's mute out the reface. Actually no, let's mute out the ARP. So it gives me some nice performance control stuff going on here. I've also got a solo button as well, so if I just want to listen to the ARP on its own, I can do that. And I can also prepare, or you know, get the mute states ready for when I come out of that solo mode. Now you'll notice the octatrack is playing, and that's because the octatrack is not being sequenced from the SL MkIII. It's only receiving the clock. But let's just bring out the solo, and then we'll... So we can now use that as a little break in there, and then when I want to, just bring the rest in. So we've got a lot of nice performance stuff you know, available to us here as well. Let's go to the Summit, why not? And just check what patch I've got. Okay, we'll go to this one, which is one that I always enjoy. And this. Bring in the filter a bit. And once again I can automate this, record it in, and make that part of the track. Now let's just solo the octatrack again. Now the reason for this is I'm going to, well, I'll just show you an actual physical connection. Here I've got an extra MIDI connector just floating around, and I have this one just floating around here to allow me to plug in any sort of device that I want to plug in. So I'm now going to plug this into the Auto Boom. Now this is an effects processor, which is an analog warming unit. So it's a compressor, a distortion. Let's find the right way around for the MIDI cable. It's a bit difficult trying to do a live stream and plug in the MIDI cable here. There we go, got it in. Now at the minute I don't have the Auto Boom as a track on here, so I'm going to go to my templates page, Shift and Sessions. I'm going to find the Auto Boom templates, which is, let's see, is going to be here. I need to choose the right channel. I think it's on MIDI channel 15. I think it is, maybe we might have to change that, but the MIDI DIN was set to 2 here, but I'm going to move that to MIDI DIN 1, which is on this channel, this bank of MIDI controls. Let's go back to the steps page. Now, if I bring up the drive, yep, we've got control over the boom. So let's get the low pass filter going. Bring up the compressor. Now, things can get quite wild with this device. Oh, let's bring the level back up. There we go, the mix. And let's just record in a bit of filter sweeping. Okay, now, at the minute, we're not hearing that filter sweeping because I've soloed the octatrack. I'm just listening to the octatrack. That means all the automation is now muted, but let's unmute that, and then we should get the filter sweeping. Move the other stuff out. Let's go back to the octatrack. Now we can see the low pass filtering is going on, and that's basically being controlled over there. So that's really something I like to have, just an extra kind of MIDI cable lying about there, and then I can, if I just decide to take something off the shelf over here and think, right, okay, I want to start to integrate that in there, I can just plug that MIDI cable in and then, you know, go to my list of templates. I've made a template pretty much for everything that we've got in the room here, and then I can just choose that and then start to play around with it. So maybe it's an interesting thing to just look at how we can actually make these templates, how we can make these different kind of controllers for the SL MkIII. So if I go over to this page, let's go over here, get the mouse up. Here we have the Novation component software. Now, if we just click here, you'll see here, this is kind of the main page. And this is essentially where we can program up well, various different things. They're all librarians for the various different Novation products here. And if I click on SL MkIII here I have a librarian, and this allows me to store my sessions. So this is kind of like my library here. We have the factory pack and we have users as well, and we can decide what we want to look at. But what we'll look at the moment is the template editor. And the end template editor here obviously gives you options to get all of the templates. And so, well, what should we look at? Well, let's go for the Otto Bit Junior. Why not? Let's just click on this one. This is one I made a while back, and that's to control this another guitar pedal that has MIDI in. If I click on the Otto Bit Junior here, now we get into this page. And this now gives me access to be able to program up essentially all of the various different controls and hardware that we have on the SL. So I have 8 pots here. I can just click on those, and what you need to do is basically get the manual for the product and look up the MIDI index or the MIDI implementation, and that will give you what's a CC value, controller change value. And so, for example, here the stutter control on that pedal uses controller change value number 19. So I set it here to number 19. I can go here and give it a name. I can also control various different aspects of it. So there's resolution, the type of behavior it has, if it's absolute or relative, how many steps it jumps by. I can say, is it a CC value, so controller change, or is it a program change? Is it an NRPN? Is it a note, a MIDI note if I want, or even a song position as well for scrolling through different tracks. And if I go to the bank option here, you see I've got a second set. Now, this Otto bit only has 6 pots on the top, and so I've only I've used there's a tempo control as well, so I've used 7 of them, but basically I didn't need to use 2 rows of pots. However, if I did want them, they're there. We've also got access to the 8 faders. And interestingly, the little Otto Bit Junior there has a really quite an interesting little sort of step sequencer that you can apply to things. And I thought, well, it'd be quite nice to have the step sequencer available to me on these faders here. So I can essentially create a little kind of step sequencer based around sliders, like the old style kind of ARP sequences and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, so it's quite a nice little 6-step sequencer there on the faders. Really useful. On the buttons, again, there's not too many things, but I can access the sort of the 6 different buttons that I needed, and again I can name them. And what's really neat is that when that's loaded up, when I press that button, I get the information, I get the feedback on the SL MkIII. Now this is interesting, the pads. So if we again look at the SL MkIII here, let's see, we go to this page here. Okay, here are the pads, and I have a grid button here, and this switches between the different kind of settings. So if I go here, it's yellow, and it now has these different pads here. Now these are set to notes on this particular one, but if we go back to the components page, I can say, okay, let's take the pad here, and we can say, okay, for pad 1, we can have it momentary, a toggle, or an increase or decrease, or it can be a trigger. And we have assignments for the pad hit, so when you strike the pad. But we also have individual pressure available on each of these pads. and that can be set to a different type of control. And that is when things can be very interesting, because you can use the pressure of each of these 16 pads to send out CC messages. So I could have maybe a filter sweep just on one of the pads, and I could just quite easily just use that pad to apply filter movement or anything that I want to the device. So the pads are really strong there. Of course, we've got the wheels as well, and we can assign whatever we want to the modulation wheel here. The pedals, we have 3 pedal inputs, and again you can say, okay, take that sustain pedal and use a specific CC control for that. And then finally the keys as well, we can assign the aftertouch to various different controls. So we can use the aftertouch key bed in here to control things on your external synthesizers as well. When I've created that, I can just hit center SL MkIII, and then obviously if you're connected via USB, you can decide where you want to send that. And one thing that I kind of like to do is actually send things per part. And the reason I like to do that, I'll just very quickly again move back to this page. Let's go here. So I can then say, okay, let's go to this blooper track here. Let's go to the templates, and I can just go and choose an empty MIDI template in here. So let's choose that. And now on this page, this simply says MIDI. It said blooper before, but now it just says MIDI. And if I go back to my components page now, which is here, I can then happily just say, okay, send to part A. And I'll just send that part now. We get a quick little message on the SL MkIII to say it's receiving. And now on here, this is now the Autobit Junior. And what's great is I haven't saved over my blooper setup. I've just added it into one of the empty MIDI template slots there as well. So that's quite a handy way of being able to save and store and manage your templates that you create within the component software. So I think, yeah, I'm going to probably finish up now. I hope that's been interesting to people. It's been a real pleasure for me to be able to kind of just talk you through, kind of the setup that I have here and the way that I like to work. And really, the SL MkIII is, as I said at the very beginning, this is the centerpiece of this room, of this whole room. I have templates for each of the devices that are in here. Obviously, some are permanently plugged in, some are not permanently plugged in, but it doesn't particularly matter, because if I do want to grab something, I can just go and grab it off the shelf, get that MIDI connection, just plug it in, and then choose the mapping, the template that I've got, and then start to integrate that into my sequencer, into this 8-track sequencer. A couple of things I should very quickly mention that I haven't really touched on are things like the arpeggiator as well. So we've got a really nice arpeggiator in here. So let's go back to that ARP 2600. I'm going to clear out those steps that we had earlier. I'm just going to just play a note, and if I turn on the arpeggiator now, of course, I now have a lovely arpeggiator on the ARP 2600. And again, I can use the automation here, or the mapping, to control the filter and the pulse width. So it just gives me a lot of nice opportunities. If I go to the art page itself, you'll see I've got 16 steps, and I can actually turn those off and start to play around with that and get some quite nice kind of musical ideas. But equally, I could say, okay, well, let's kind of go a bit crazy. Let's make it a 5-length arpeggiator with 2 steps on it. But let's put those 2 on. So now we've got a really kind of unusual time signature against it. Let's bring in the octatrack for context. Let's hit play, of course. Go to the ARP, and then bring that. And I can lock the arpeggiator onto a particular part. So let's go to the ARP. That's locked onto that page now. And that allows me to go to other pages. I'll clear out that automation from the auto boom that we had before. So you can use this in kind of a lot of nice ways. Another thing that I will mention very quickly as well is, let's take the latch off there for the arpeggiator, the zones as well. And this is something I really enjoy using. We have up to 8 different zones on the SL MkIII. And what's a zone? Well, basically I can set a bit of the keyboard to basically control one instrument. And so here we've got zone 1, and this will be set to the beat squeezer. It's on track 1. So let's just put the bottom octave there as the beat squeezer. Zone 2 is destination part 2. And that's the reface in this. So let's go back to zones. Let's set that zone. So let's go from, where was it? It was 2 octaves. So we'll go from there to there. And now let's take zone 3 off. We don't need that. Take 4 off. We don't need that. Let's turn zones on so we can do it. And then go back to our page. And you see now how the keyboard is split. It's the color. Let's change the color of the pads there. So let's, on the beat squeezer, let's make that purple. Now you can see we've got the purple piano sounds from the beat squeezer. And now I can play the reface over the top. So there's a really nice way of being able to, you know, split all of these out and give you a lot more performance control. And the final thing to mention is the scales mode as well, and we can turn scales on. And if you notice now here, a lot of the lights will have gone off on the above the LEDs here, and that's because we're applying a scale to it. We're forcing things into scale. So if I try and play a C major on the reface, let's take zones off for the moment. So I'll go to the reface. Even though I'm playing E natural in C major, it's being forced into being a minor scale. So this means I will never play a note that is out of that scale, and therefore, you know, I can use this to help me get to the places musically that I want to get to. Okay, so let's finish off now. As I say, I hope this has been interesting. I'll just have a quick look at the chat room there, just to see if there are any more questions to pick up. Okay, so yeah, well, one question from Radek Pilic is, could you show us and talk a little bit about how you use Sessions View standalone as well as with components? Well, I think I spoke about that at the very beginning of the session. The Sessions page here, the Sessions View, is really where you store all your music. So, I mean, let's see what we've got here. I'm going to just hit play. Obviously, this is the thing we've been working on. I'm not going to save that, but this is where I show myself up here, because I'm going to go and find another thing. Let's bring this one in. Okay, so that was something I was working on earlier. And this is basically now where I'm basically storing my music, if you like. This is where I'm loading and saving things. I have basically on this track here, if I go to the next session, I think this was a kind of a development from that. So if I just press this, you'll see now it's going to queue up and then it'll move into that position. But if I press shift and hold it, okay, now then let's be brave and move to another session that'll be completely unrelated and may sound completely terrible, but let's find out. Yeah. Nothing is in there, so that didn't work very well, but so I've got 2 blank templates there, but let's go for another one over here. So I can kind of basically switch very quickly between the sessions there, and then, you know, use the like the faders here to maybe transition a little bit. And I've obviously got some stuff here. Bit random, but anyway, you hopefully get the point there, that the sessions page is where you store your tracks, if you like, your kind of things, and then just move between them. So really, I would use the sessions page when playing live. I would populate this with all the various different tracks that I wanted to play live, and then I would just basically move through them. And also, you can rename the these sessions on the in the component software as well, so I can actually give each of these a label, and that's really, really useful when you're playing live, because you're not just kind of guessing as to what it is. You can actually see which track you're going to move to. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me this evening. As I say, I hope it's been useful for you. I've had a lot of fun talking about the SL MkIII. I guess you probably can tell I'm very, very enthusiastic about this thing. I think it's a very, very strong controller keyboard, but equally very, very nice keyboard with a sequencer attached. And the fact that we've got 8 tracks, we've got CV gate modulation, but we've also got these templates and automation as well. It's a very, very powerful way of being able to capture your ideas and record in. So thank you very much indeed for watching, and all the best, and I'll see you the next time. Thanks a lot.